From ConnectBooster, I'm Ryan Goodman. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of talking to Karl Palachuk, author, owner of Small Business Thoughts, and president of the Great Little Book Publishing Company. Karl is an icon in the channel as a former MSP, an in-demand industry speaker, and a respected thought leader. Here's what he had to say.
I can't tell you how many people in the last 10 years will say, man, recurring revenue saved my bacon in the recession of 2008, 2009. And that they wouldn't have gotten through it without knowing that on the first of the month, they paid their rent, paid their employees, kept the lights on, paid the internet. That recurring revenue base also gives you freedom to try new things that you might not have tried before.
Karl, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I know you are a busy man, and we're gonna dig into all of the plates you have in the air spinning and all the value that you're adding to the community. It's really impressive. And so again, just thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. It's an honor. And also really interested in discussing, the ways that MSPs can tune up the financial side of their business. I know that's one of the areas that you have certainly helped a lot of channel partners with over the years. But before we get into that, I'd really like to get a few other questions out of the way. Are you cool with that?
Sure.
All right, great. So let's get really one of the basics out of the way. Can you give us really 100,000-foot view of what you do inside of the channel and where people can find you online? Because there's a number of different places.
Well, sadly, this year they can't find me at any shows.
Right.
But online, I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
My website, my primary website is smallbizthoughts.org. And but I'm also I have a YouTube channel. It's also Small Biz Thoughts. So fairly easy to find. And I'm happy to engage with anybody. I always tell people, I want to chat on all of these social media. So, please connect.
Well, and it's fun. I mean, you're a hard guy to miss because you're so engaged inside of the community. So, from courses to spinning up cloud to spinning up an MSP, you know what I mean? It's like there's just a ton of really, really good, not just good content, but actionable content. And I guess that really rolls me into my next question for you. You're so well-rounded in the industry from running an MSP and yourself from the past. To say you're well-rounded would really be kind of an understatement. Let's be honest. But I'd really like to go back. How did you get started, in the technology industry?
So it's interesting. So going way, way back, I used to run IT infrastructure for a subsidiary of a major corporation.
Okay.
And then I decided, I want to go out on my own, and I thought I would be the kind of consultant that I am today. But what I wanted to do was to help people download political information and run reports so that lobbyists and state agencies could get better information out of the public data that was being produced.
That's really interesting.
But the first consulting gig that I got was with HP.
Okay.
And it was to manage their internal tech support at the Roseville plant in Roseville, California. So suddenly I was in charge of 25 technicians and all of the internal tech support for HP Roseville.
Wow.
And we also managed their backups and the Unix help desk. So it turned out my first job had nothing to do with politics. And even though that's where my degrees are, I never had another political related job again. And so I just went from there to the next and the next, and then eventually decided, I want to have more than one client at a time. And so I started taking on additional clients and moved from being the kind of consultant that has one client at a time to the kind of consultant that has multiple clients. And from there, because my background came from a certain industry and a certain way of doing things,
Mhm.
I documented everything. I documented processes and
Mm.
procedures. I signed contracts, right? I did all these things and then found myself in an industry where, at least, in 1995, nobody signed contracts. Nobody, documented anything. It was all in
Right.
somebody's head, or it was on an Excel spreadsheet on the back of a napkin or whatever. And so I started talking to people about how I document stuff. And I wrote the network documentation workbook,
Yeah.
and it just sort of snowballed from there. And I remember the first time somebody saw a book on documentation, he told me, you're giving away all of your secret sauce. And I'm like, there is no secret sauce. It's just a form for how you configure a router, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
there's no magic here. It's just, you need a standardized form and you need standardized processes. And so I just started writing books on the side and eventually created a company specifically to distribute my books.
Yes. Yeah. Because you self-publish now, don't you? Like all of the
Right.
projects that, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so we publish our own books, and that gives us the freedom to price it as we want.
Yeah.
Some books are not available on Audible because they will not let you charge more than a certain amount of money.
Sure.
And one of the things about nonfiction is that, when I write a book, it's a tool that you can use to improve your business. It's not like fiction where you're going to read it once, put it down, and never look at it again. You're going to go
Right.
back to it again and again. And so, uh, as a tool, it has more value than entertainment.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And so now everything that you're doing, it had started with books and documentation, and you've been able to roll right through into the digital age. Are you finding yourself focusing, more on the digital media now versus um, the written books, or what's that mix for you
Well,
now?
it's still a written book, most of my stuff.
Yeah.
Although, we do a lot of podcasts and
Right.
audio stuff and all of that. Whatever people want to learn. I have to be honest, I've never been a fan of learning by video because I have to slow down and learn at the pace of the video.
Hmm.
Where with reading, I read pretty fast and I
Sure.
can read at my own pace. But other people like video. And so I started, a YouTube channel, and I've really been pushing a lot of that because it's what people like,
Yeah.
And one of the rules of publishing is you don't get to control how people want to consume your stuff, right? So you have to put it out in audio and Kindle and, for the iPhone, everything else. So when we produce a new book, I've got somebody that does all the internal layout, and then she
Yeah.
gives me the formats in Kindle and all of these other formats so that they can be published everywhere.
Oh, that's really neat. Have you expanded that business at all, outside of your projects, or is that something that you really keep exclusive to the projects that you work on, the production
The
company?
publishing side,
Yeah.
yeah, I pretty much do my own stuff. I've
Sure.
published a couple of other people's stuff, but most people somehow think that if you're the printer or the publisher, that you're going to be promoting their stuff, and that
Gotcha.
just never works, right?
Sure. Sure.
At the end of the day, I always tell people, when the president of the United States writes a book, it steps, out of the White House, writes a book, right, makes $1 million. The minute that they step off the stage and stop pushing their book, the book publisher lifts up the books, puts them on the closeout table, and they're done, right? And
Interesting.
the lesson is no one else can promote your book. So no matter who you are, if you're not promoting it, neither is anybody else. So
Do you find that correlation, in businesses as well as MSPs are marketing? There's all this affiliate stuff, but it would also seem, you know, along the lines of, if you're not in the business, being passionate about it and working, and having some semblance of control, it's maybe as tough to be as effective out
yeah,
out in the
that's a
marketplace
great
and grow.
question because I do find that a lot of people, they go on and on about how, oh, we're always, getting referrals and all of this. Referrals are kind of overrated, in my opinion.
Sure.
First of all, if I try to refer someone to your IT business, I may get wrong what you do, what emphasis you want to put on things. I may say, oh, he's cheap and he works, on Sunday night for no extra money. And
Right,
you can
right,
call him 24/7, or you just send him a tweet and he'll respond.
right,
Like, that's not what you want your business to be marketed as, right?
right.
Or they say, he's good with security and stuff, but I'm not sure that he's like up to speed on the wireless, right?
Sure.
Well, you don't want them saying that either. You want a nice, warm introduction, and then
Yeah,
shut up and go away so I
right.
can sell my own business. So I do think that you have to manage the referral process and not just beg for referrals and let somebody else be in control of it. So,
Oh, that's great advice. I'm going to shift a little bit of gear on you here. It's been a crazy year. I hate to date these things, but it's still so relevant, right? I mean, just in the chaos, and even to the point earlier, we're not seeing everybody out on the road like we were
right.
just a few short months ago. What are some of the biggest hurdles that you see MSPs face? I mean, not only in the midst of it, but even as we're coming out of this thing. What are some of those hurdles that you think need to be on the radar?
Well, it's funny. When this first started, I created a series of videos that basically were like, hey, here's what you need to know. Money's going to disappear.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're getting paid in advance. If you miss this thing that I've been promoting for the last 5 years, which is to get prepaid for everything,
Right.
now is the time to adopt it, because you're about to learn the hard lesson that people will stop paying, and they'll make all the excuses and all that. And suddenly people say, well, I'll pay you when I can, and I'll get around to it. And by, whatever means I feel comfortable, and blah, blah, blah. Well, people who had never experienced that because they'd had good paying customers, because they came into business, let's say in the last 5 years,
Right.
suddenly they're in a recession. Money is tight. People can't pay. And so they are learning the lesson that anybody who's been in business 10, 15, 20 years already knows.
Right.
There are people who are happy to pay on time or even early when there's no recession.
Right.
But when their money dries up and their clients stop paying, they don't have any choice.
Right.
They have to prioritize things, and you may or may not be the top priority.
Yeah.
So
the game changes.
that's huge. And so, getting back to more specifically about your question, several companies have announced they are not doing any live events in 2021.
Right.
So they expect this to drag on for quite a while. So you go from one game to a different game, right? We were in the game of getting everybody remote, and to be honest, our industry stepped up and did an amazing job.
Incredible.
Partly because we've been doing this for 20 years, right? You and I have been on video calls for a long time doing remote support. We've got the tools. And so it was super easy for us. And it, may not be easy for a lot of businesses that have never been run remotely before, but we stepped up and we showed them how. And so that getting into it has, been super successful.
Yeah.
The long play of managing an ongoing business, or an attorney who didn't expect to be doing this for a year, or a manufacturer that didn't expect to be doing this for a year and a half, it's going to be a different game. So we just have to be very careful and very intentional about it. Still got a plan for when people go back to their offices. And I'm a big believer you have to ignore most of the advice about the future, because people say, oh, nobody's ever going back to their office. Right. Trust me, people are going stir crazy. They can't wait to get back to the office.
Agreed.
So, but we don't know when that will happen. But when it happens, we need to be ready and we need to have a plan. So the good news is this is our opportunity to start having Zoom calls or whatever with clients, engage them in these conversations, talk about what the plan is. So on the day that their state or their province opens up, they can actually execute the plan, and it's not a sales call, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a
Agreed.
matter of, remember what we talked about? Okay, let's do that.
Hmm. Hmm. Oh, that's great advice and perspective. And that really ties into really next questions around monthly recurring revenue. And we internally end up working with a lot of different business models that have a mix of whatever percentage project, recurring, one time, whether it's still in hardware type sales. But monthly recurring revenue, at least from our perspective, we're finding to be really, really important through these times. Is there a perfect mix that you're seeing out in the industry? That's a loaded question, man. I feel bad even asking it.
Well,
But it
I
is,
don't know.
that predictability seems to be so
It's
important.
funny. I don't know that there needs to be a perfect mix. There needs to be a good, solid base. What recurring
Sure.
revenue does for you is it gives you a base that gives you a certain level of freedom. I can't tell you how many people, and I know that you've talked to them as well, that in the last 10 years will say, man, recurring revenue saved my bacon in the
Right.
recession of 2008, 2009.
Right.
Right. And that they wouldn't have gotten through it without knowing that on the first of the month, they paid their rent, paid their employees, kept the lights on, paid the, the internet. And so it goes a long, long ways. And then since then, when the economy was going really well, that recurring revenue base also gives you freedom to try new things that you might not have
Right.
tried before.
Agreed.
So it's huge. And, even if the project labor disappears for a month or 2 or 6, that recurring revenue can still literally keep you in business.
Yeah, that's good perspective. And you had mentioned something about a minute ago that I wanted to highlight, which I think is really, really important. You had talked about having conversations about what the next phase of people going into the office looks like, and doing that now, because when the time to execute on that, it's not a sales call. It's
Right.
it's going through the plan, and I mean, that is sales, but it's not salesy. I mean, it's brilliant. And I really want to highlight that it's the preparedness and game planning for the future. And you a lot of times have mentioned bad sales habits that MSPs have. What are some of those poor practices, and how can we teach them, or your insight there, and how to prepare for what the next wave of revenue is going to be? What are some of those things that they can be doing to get out of those bad habits and be doing the right habits, like you had mentioned?
Well, I think the most important piece is to have this literally ongoing, never ending conversation with your
Mm.
clients. And I call them roadmap meetings, but basically, get together. And now's a perfect time. Literally today, contact your clients one by one and say, I want to set up a Zoom meeting, and tell them this is not a sales meeting. I want to talk about, when you go back to the office, now that you've been working remote with the server sitting in a closet, when it's time to replace that server, can I please move you to cloud services?
Sure.
And here's the plan. Here's what we think that you should be doing. Or, you've gotten addicted to these certain tools. Would you like to bring some of these remote tools into your daily operations? We'll set you up with some laptops, make sure they're secure. We'll have all these conversations, and we can even make some decisions. And, for example, at some point your backup is going to, get old and start being unreliable.
Right.
So let me, introduce you to cloud backup, and what does that look like? Okay. And we can have that conversation. We can even talk a little bit about the money side, but it's just only to give you a ballpark. And then when it's time to execute, it's literally all you say is, remember we talked about this, when the BDR dies, we're going to move you to cloud backup. Okay, let me get you an invoice for that.
Awesome.
And so it's very easy. But in a recession, again, this is such a great time to say, okay, as you start moving people around, maybe we make sure that we get the newest machines on the desktops of the people that are not being laid off, right? And let's take those other machines of people who have been laid off. Let's go ahead and take them offline, make sure that you're not, you're not being charged for the monthly fees,
Right.
but they're not plugged in and getting virused up while nobody's
Right.
sitting there, right? And then when it's time to put them back online, we'll do that in an orderly fashion, and you get to decide whether you need to buy a new machine or bring that one back into service, but we'll make sure that we update it first and so forth. You make all those decisions when there's no money on the line.
Yeah.
And it's a casual, comfortable conversation about their technology. And clients just feel like they can trust you and that you're having a meeting that isn't costing them money just to, sell you something.
Yeah. While you're there. Yeah.
Yeah. It goes a long, long ways. And then, to be honest, when you come and say, okay, remember what happened back in the recession? And we were looking out for you. Today, unfortunately, I have to tell you, you've got to buy a new firewall.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, yeah, I understand, da, 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 da. And it goes a long ways to actually get people to talk about, recycling their hardware and all this kind of stuff. And again, at a time when you're not trying to obviously make money off of it.
Hey guys, Ryan here for a quick break from our show. We want to thank Karl for joining us on today's episode. You can find out more about Karl and his many hats at smallbizthoughts.com. Now, this wouldn't be an ad break without running some ads, so I'd like to talk to you about our product, ConnectBooster. ConnectBooster is the premier accounts receivable management and payment automation tool for the channel. When our partners invoice and bill their clients, ConnectBooster automates the payment, automates the accounting, and gives 24/7, 365 visibility into end clients so they can see current invoices, past invoices, auto-pay settings, securely stored checking, credit card data, and so much more. We all know it's hard enough to get in the door of a prospect. It's hard enough to close the deal. It shouldn't be hard to accept their money when the sale is made. If your business isn't one of the thousands that is getting paid faster with ConnectBooster, reach out to us at ConnectBooster.com to learn more how you can automate your cash flow. Before we get back to the show, we want to let you know all the ways you can find us online. Visit our website, ConnectBooster.com/podcast, to listen to new episodes before they air on the podcast network. If you'd rather wait, our episodes are available on iTunes, Spotify, Google, and really anywhere you can listen to podcasts. So search ConnectBooster on your favorite platform and subscribe to get notified when there's a new episode. If you have suggestions for future episodes or want to be a guest on the podcast, please email us at podcast@connectbooster.com or send us a message on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll point you in the right direction. Lastly, if you like the show, leave us a review on iTunes and tell us why you like it. Thanks for listening to the Confessions of an IT Business Owner. We'll get back to the podcast and talk to you soon. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's brilliant. Hope everyone's taking notes. I'm taking notes. I hope everyone else is taking notes. Start writing. If you haven't, go back. Listen to that again. That philosophy, you had said a never-ending discussion. Now, do you like to be formal in that schedule, like a QBR, or how do you keep track of that cadence with your clients, and what are your recommendations on making sure that constant conversation is happening?
We never really called them, QBRs, quarterly business reviews, simply because it's almost impossible to get somebody to do it every quarter, even the best clients. So what we would do is very simply, as soon as we're finished with a roadmap meeting, I ask my admin to get in touch with that client and schedule the next one as soon as possible. And so, they'll say, well, let's try to do this in 3 months, but it'll turn out to be 4 or 5 or 6.
Sure.
But as long as somebody's got the job of making that appointment, you just make it as soon as you can. You're unlikely to have anybody actually do it more than 2 or 3 times a year.
Okay.
So, and I've told the story before, but I'll tell you, The last time, so I've built and sold 2 managed service businesses. And the second time that I sold a business, probably a year later, I was at an airport in Southern California and I ran into a former client. And she's literally one of my best clients ever. And she
Yeah.
said, "Hey, can you talk to Tom? Because we haven't had a roadmap meeting since you left. And can you help us organize something?" And I said, "Sure." So I, called Tom and I organized a meeting. And so the 3 of us sat down. And I think Tom was blown away at the value of these meetings for her because she had bought into replacing a third of her equipment every year. So it's always under warranty. So the first part of the meeting consisted of him taking orders as she said, "We have to replace these machines and these machines, and this machine is 2 years old, so we'll be replacing it next year. And it looks like we need 5 machines and we'll schedule them a month apart. And that way we've got a nice even flow and, da 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 da." And he was literally taking orders for the first 15 minutes. And that's the value of that, because
Yeah.
after many, many years of having these regular meetings, she was just in the flow and she was kind of feeling like out of her element because she hadn't had a meeting
Had
about
that.
technology.
Yeah.
And we also did a checkup on, that they had replaced the firewall, so it's not due for another 2 years. And, here's what's going to happen with moving the final data to the cloud and so forth. But that way she felt like she'd gotten kind of a checkup to make sure that somebody had thought about her technology because she doesn't want to.
Yeah. No, that's smart. And I mean, it's just it's such a professional approach too. That trusted advisor, consultant. I love, again, man, if you guys aren't taking notes on the process of sales and the ability to pregame, but it's all value add too. So I mean, it's and you're using that empathy to draw out the real business issues where there's no barrier. Then I mean, you're really now dealing with the issues versus this weird sales process where they've got cards against their chest. And I don't want to really talk about this because I don't want to spend the money over here, but they're causing real business issues,
Right. Well, and so many people in our industry like to say, "Oh, I'm no good at sales. I hate sales. Blah, blah, blah." It's like, okay, this doesn't feel like sales. This
Yeah.
feels like me telling you that's a really insecure wireless access point. Can we, please replace that sometime?
Yeah.
And, planning for the future. The other thing is, again, in the middle of a recession, if you are helping your clients get through this by moving equipment around and not spending money, they actually see the value of you as a consultant, right? Not just a technical salesperson. And that goes a long, long ways because at the end of the day, we are moving so much stuff to the cloud that more and more, we're not going to see stuff break. And so your value has to be as a consultant, not as a technician.
Good point. Really good point. And all of this is really an undertone of creating that client loyalty as well. I mean, it's so expensive to
Absolutely.
replace a customer, versus continue to grow wallet share and the value and the relationship, inside of that current client relationship. That shifts me to an uncomfortable question, which is, when would an MSP, what are the situations that can come up where maybe they're working with a client that's not ideal anymore? And, what would be the process or of, I don't want to say firing, but separating yourself from serving that business anymore? And if you're in that situation, do you have any suggestions on how that should be done properly? It's the never burn a bridge. It's me, not you. I don't know. I think
Right.
I think we could all use some great
So
tactical advice
what's
around that.
funny is I discussed the what I call weeding your client garden many,
Okay.
many times for the last 15 years, written blog posts about it, written chapters about it in my books. I'm happened to be, as we record this, teaching a class on the Managed Services in a Month book.
Mhm.
And so in the last class, I covered this exact topic about how you evaluate your clients. And I basically, you should create a list of criteria that are important to you. Do they pay on time? Do they have interesting projects? Are they nice to work with? You don't have to say, do they invite us to their, company barbecue, but it's
Right.
a good indicator that they're nice people, that they treat you with respect, right? Some of the criteria are financial. Some of the criteria are about their technology,
Mhm.
and some of the criteria about them as human beings. I'm
Yeah.
a huge fan of, I only work with people I like.
Right.
And that's true of employees, clients, vendors, distributors. And so for me, that's a big emphasis.
Mhm.
And so you figure out these criteria. And what I encourage you to do is to have everybody in your company evaluate every single client. So
Interesting.
if people in the front office have worked with clients, they get to evaluate them on all of these criteria. Some of them, they may have no comments one way or the other,
Sure.
but the people in the front office they may say that a certain client doesn't treat them with respect, where the technicians get a little more respect, the owner gets lots of respect, right? You as the owner may have a very different view of how your employees are treated, right, than your
Great
employees
point.
do. So you got to take the big picture, and then, obviously, you want clients who are profitable and so forth. But
Yeah.
if you've got clients that don't pay on time, don't treat you with respect, and, are just not nice to work with, it hurts you not at all to get rid of them, reduce the total amount of stomach, acid in your company, and, go find somebody who's nicer to work with. So
Yeah.
I did this class, and 2 days later, somebody that I've known for more than 20 years sent me a note and said he had fired 2 of his clients based on that exercise. And he said, to be honest, it was overdue, and they were not very profitable. And I'm happy to have them not in my business anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people, this is one of the few things where people, uh, challenge me on Reddit and some of these other forums. Carl doesn't understand, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you, Carl does understand.
Been
I've
in
built a couple of businesses,
Yeah.
and we have weeded down, our clients. And the goal is always to find a client that looks more like your top 10 clients.
Sure.
Not the most expensive clients, but the ones that are the nicest to work with, who are they take your advice, they do what they're told, they're super profitable, and they're good to work with. Go get another client like that and get rid of one of the bottom clients, and you just basically work your way into a better, more profitable business that's better for you to work in, better for your employees. And it gradually happens over time. You don't fire 50% of your clients tomorrow.
Right.
But if you describe a lot of your clients as jerks, you fire them eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Make the list, right?
So yeah, because you don't want to work with those people, and your employees don't want to work with those people. So make your life better.
Yeah. Well, and you really tied that back to also a big element in company culture. You know what I mean? And how people are being treated, and getting them involved in the process of evaluating that client base. I don't think that can help but create unity inside of the organization, everyone rowing, in the boat the same way, because you're fostering that input, which is really not only valuable, but so nice and inclusive that those individuals feel like they're an important part of the organization, no matter where they sit in the function that they play.
And, company culture has to come from the top down,
Agreed.
or as my brother says, otherwise it grows from the bottom up.
and don't try that. just
Well, the funny thing is, most of us who are independent consultants, we got this way because of a previous boss who was a total jerk.
Sure.
Right?
Good
So
point.
don't be the jerk that people want to leave.
Don't produce consultants.
Exactly. Do not be a consultant creator. So
that's
that should be
hilarious.
your goal.
Line of the day there. That's really good. That's really good. A question that I like to ask, just a little bit of reflection. So again, being in the industry and being a professional for a long time, if you were to talk to yourself 10, 20, 30 years back, getting into your professional career, is there any specific advice that you'd really like to impart upon the younger Karl versus, what you know now?
So on one hand, I would say so much advice. It's, I could write a book about it. On the other hand, I have. So, one of my most recent book is The Absolutely Unbreakable Rules of Service Delivery.
Yeah.
And that literally comes from my experience. I would say rule one, which I'm trying to think, probably took me 7 or 8 years to figure out, is that you absolutely have to do everything you can to get paid in advance for everything. Every bad customer experience you've had is probably related. Well, probably 90% of them are related to money. Make money a non-issue. You've agreed to pay me, and I've agreed to deliver this service here. Here's a way where I can do an automatic payment, and it just happens.
Right.
And so that's a huge one. And again, you look at this recession. Nobody knew when the next recession was going to be, but I can tell you, I knew that if you had been paid in advance for everything, you wouldn't have a financial crunch at the beginning of the recession.
Right. Really.
So that's one of the biggies. Another one is, and again, this is one of these things that took me a long time to figure out. Ignore your competition. They are irrelevant. Your clients are not going to, very, very few of them are actually going to shop around. And if they do, they're shopping on price.
Right.
So just raise your rates and go find somebody else. And, there's so many examples of people who say, oh, nobody around here buys managed services, or nobody signs an ongoing contract, and blah, blah, blah. And yet across town, there's somebody who's doing it. It's hard for people to believe that this is true, but I built several businesses on this model. Do what you want to do, and then go find people who want to do business your way. Right? I mean, look at Costco versus your grocery store. The grocery store is happy to have you come in there 14 times a day, buy a stick of gum, and put it on your credit card. Costco wants you to come in there once a month, spend $400, and do not come back for another month, because it costs them money every time they interact with a client.
Sure.
So, completely different business models, both very, very successful, right? And you look at, everybody who's out there does business differently, and they're all successful. So success does not depend on picking the right business model and executing it perfectly. It depends on executing well your business model and what you want to do. Now, sometimes you hear this advice of, oh, if you do what you love, you'll never work another day in your life. That's fine if what you love makes money, right? If you want to play hacky sack and watch reruns, you're not going to be successful with that.
Good point.
So, you take the advice with a grain of salt, but
for sure.
But, really, you've looked at it. You've worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of managed service providers. And you talk to them and you say, do you do per device or per user? And they go, well, we have this hybrid because we do this and this, but we also do that, and we'll bolt on a couple of those. You say, oh, okay, well, what's your markup? Well, our markup depends on whether it's hardware, software, an existing client, a one-time project. Oh, okay. It's like every time you ask, your perceptions about how they might be doing business, they come up with something different. The number of business models in this industry is phenomenal. And so you can be successful doing almost anything you want to do, as long as you find people who will do business your way.
Oh, that's
so, just don't worry that your competition has a bundle of 5 licenses instead of 3, or that
Right.
they're selling, Google this and that instead
Mhm.
of, Microsoft Office. I mean, it, just do what you think is good and go find people who want to do business your way.
I hear in what you're saying also, I associate you with these 3 words, the relax, focus, succeed mantra. And I hear that right through don't worry about it,
Right?
focus on what you're doing and get to work and make it happen. That's
Yep. I mean, the thing is, I give lots of advice, and it's funny, in my books, I kind of take this approach of, I'm not going to lay out every possible way that you could do your business.
right.
I'm going to lay out the way I do it.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be very, very emphatic. Now, take this, strip out what doesn't work for you, add what does, create your own thing, right? So even though I'm very prescriptive in the way I write, I put a lot of emphasis on, but if it doesn't work for you, don't do that, right? So, it's a big piece of it that, I'm a firm believer that you can be successful if you just keep working at it. Do anything well for 10, 15, 20 years, and you'll be
Right.
suddenly successful.
Oh, that's great advice. Well, Karl, I could keep you on here for literally 3 hours. I could. I mean, we'll have to. I have so many other questions I want to ask you, but I also want to respect your time. For all of our listeners, I don't know. I have notes everywhere, so I need to go back and consolidate these. But I think that's just a representation of just some of the valuable topics and advice that we had covered. So go check out. I mean, here's what you do. You go Google Karl and you will find all of the resources. He's not hard to find. He's exactly right. He's being very humble in the beginning of the podcast of where you can find him. So reach out. There's just tons of great business advice, and it's hard to even pick a single one to focus on. But if you're not opposed to it, I would love to do this again, because I have a whole bunch of other
Sure.
stuff that I would love to just draw out of you, because this has been an awful lot of fun, and selfishly, it's also been a great value to me. So thank you so much for the time.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'd be very happy to come back and do it again.
Awesome. Thank you, Karl.